This is Target Score Weekly with Joey Slattery and Taylor Allen. Welcome to episode 3 of Target Score Weekly with myself, Joey Slattery, and Taylor Allen, who is joining us from parts unknown today. Taylor, where are you exactly?
I am in a McDonald's parking lot in Sioux City, Iowa. Just another day in the life, just another day in the life. The girlfriend and I, we did a road trip to Kansas City this week, which was super fun. And, just to break up the drive a little bit, we figured we'd pull over to Sioux City, Iowa. And, the running joke around the NHL is that there's no Wi-Fi in Winnipeg, or at least really bad Wi-Fi in Winnipeg, which we know is not true. We got some pretty good Wi-Fi back home. But no, you can actually say that about Sioux City. Apparently the Wi-Fi here isn't very good because we checked into the hotel and, got everything set up and whatever, and wasn't working out too hot. So drove over to a McDonald's. Girlfriend not too happy that I ditched her into some kind of somewhat sketchy hotel in this random city in Iowa. But, hey, you got to do what you got to do to talk some CEBL basketball.
Taking the show on the road live from his vehicle. I love it. This is Wednesday, July 12th, the night we recorded this. And, not a great week for the CEBL, Taylor. They went 1-1, but they've lost 3 of their last 4. They played in Edmonton, where they picked up the win and then lost a tough one in Saskatoon. So just going through give a little rundown. So Winnipeg beats Edmonton 99-95, and then loses on the national TV game, the TSN game of the week. They lose an absolute thriller, 99-96 on a game-winning three-pointer when all they needed was one. Saskatchewan, Justin Wright Foreman, who we'll get into in just a little bit. So taking a look at the standings as they are right now, Ottawa Blackjacks now the new team that are running away with this right now. They are the hottest team in the league right now. They won again today in Brampton. They are 11-5, leading the Eastern Conference, looking like they're going to lock up the bye to the semifinals at the championship weekend. Filling out the East, Niagara River Lions 9-6 in second, Scarborough Shooting Stars 7-6 in third. Montreal, who will be the upcoming opponent for the Winnipeg CEBL, are 6 wins and 8 losses in fourth, and the Brampton Honey Badgers, last year's champions, in the basement in the East this year, so far anyway, at 5-9. In the West, hey Taylor, the CEBL have lost 3 of the last 4, but they are still in first place at 9-6. Calgary, though, right behind them. Big game coming up because Calgary's next game is against Winnipeg. That is the second of 2 games coming up this week. They are 8-7. Edmonton right on their tail, 7-8. Vancouver 5-8. Doesn't matter, though. They're automatically in the semis, and the Saskatchewan Rattlers need to pull off a bit of a miracle run here at 5-9, but getting that fifth win was a big one in Winnipeg. And I think we should start on a positive note. That Edmonton game, good bounce back after back-to-back losses on the East Coast road trip there, playing Ottawa and Montreal. Bit close, but a big game for Mr. Simon Hildebrand. What did you think of his performance?
Yeah, you referred to it as the Edmonton game, but when you and I were texting, we kept calling it the Simon Hildebrand game because that was really his big coming out party this season. And, it's funny, on our last episode last week, we were talking about how the Canadian talent and the guys on the bench really need to step up because of these past couple of weeks, it's really been, EJ, Teddy, and Jelani as the big 3, and the Canadian guys just haven't been getting it done for the most part. But then, sure enough, the very next game, Simon Hildebrand puts up a huge performance, 19 points. Makes 7 of his 12 attempts from the field. But it wasn't even the numbers so much. Just watching the game, you could just tell he was playing with more confidence than he has at any point this year. I remember there's one play, I think it might have been target score time. Just the way he put down the ball and took it to the rim with such confidence, in crunch time like that, it was like, okay. Because before, watching him play, there's been some moments where, it kind of, he's being a little passive, right? And again, he lacks experience compared to most of these guys for the most part. So, Yeah, I mean, getting the win was huge, but I think the fact that they got such a big game from Simon, who's a player that they're really leaning on right now, big minutes, and that's not going to change down the stretch either. So getting a huge game from him was big, and that's putting it that's understating it really.
Well, yeah, I mean, he had a team-high 19 points. He was tied with E.J. Anasike. He outscored Teddy Allen, which doesn't happen much, and I'll get into him in just a second. But, yeah, he was 7 for 12 from the field, shooting 58%, 5 for 8 from 3 for 62%. I mean, we were talking about that consistency, wanting to see him. A few weeks ago, I posted a video of him and E.J. Anasike working on that three-pointer after the win against Niagara. The last home game before they played Saskatchewan, and seems to be paying off in that one. You said it, though. He needed that game. You were big on that last week, and he must have been listening to the podcast because he really showed up for this one and really, filled a big role and pretty much ended up being a massive win because if they lose that game, it was tight. I mean, it's only a 4-point differential. They lose 4 straight, and now where are they? Right now they're in the thick of a playoff race and not necessarily trying to fend people off. But the other thing I liked about that game too, Taylor, and it actually had to do with Simon, but with Chad Posthumus, his playing time has been brought down a little bit. Shane Osiande getting a couple of starts and kind of on the rise a little bit, which is a good thing. But Chad really impressed me in that game. He had a couple of nice plays in the high post with Hildebrandt. There was one in particular where actually it was a nice feed to Hildebrandt, but it was a bit of a fading to the side three. That was like that was his best shot because it was just such a pro shot to take. I think any high school or university coach would probably be reaming you out if you missed this one. But the confidence coming off a screen, catching and shooting off balance, off to the side, and it was just a perfect swish, but it was nicely set up by Chad, who set up a screen off the pass. And then the other one was he drew the double team at the top of the key, and then he found Simon backdoor, which was a heads-up play on Simon's part, too, reading that play. But he was just, when he's not scoring, he's making the plays from the high post. And we talk about how powerful he is and, his battles down low, but he was showing a little finesse in that game. And it kind of sparked the ball movement. We've been a little critical, too, on the ball movement of the Sea Bears this year and how they can slow it down, which was working in their favor. And it just seemed now it's like teams are kind of getting on that. And they're not scoring at will, but when you see the ball movement that they had against Edmonton, that was quite promising. And it was nice to see the big guys getting involved in it, too, and creating from the post.
But the thing is, if Simon didn't have basically his career game that night, there's no way they win that game because you look at some of the other guys, AJ Hess and Glenn Yang, they combined for 2 points. And like you mentioned earlier, Teddy Allen only had 17 points, which for him isn't, the usual. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of been the theme for this team. It feels like, maybe there'll be one bench guy who kind of has a pretty solid performance for a game, but we're not seeing 2, 3, 4 guys, coming up big off the bench. And, right now I think they could get away with that. But, heading into championship weekend, I know the starters are going to be playing even more minutes and stuff, but you can't have someone like AJ Hess playing close to 24 minutes and not scoring a single basket. And Glenn Yang, you're talking about how Simon must have listened to the podcast. Well, I guess Glenn Yang didn't because, I was a little harsh on him last week, to say the least, and he follows it up with a 2-point performance.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's as much as it's it's not that you're hard on him, but you're speaking the truth in the sense that he's eating up a lot of minutes on the floor, and it's not really showing on the stat sheet where it should. And as you said, the Canadians were the ones that needed to step up. They got one to step up in Simon. To Teddy's credit, in that game, he didn't score. It was 25, 26. It always seems like he meets at least his average. He still had a pretty big game in the sense that not all the shots were falling. But he was creating in other ways. Like, you look at his stat line. He had 7 boards, 5 assists, 2 steals, and some of those were crucial baskets. Like the 17 points he did score, were in the thick of things. It wasn't just some gimme baskets when you're up 20 or down 20. These were some game-changing baskets. So I'll give Teddy credit. Like, he is able to adapt when the ball's not falling for him or where he's kind of letting the others carry the load a little bit. Like Simon Hildebrandt, who has a career game as the player of the game. That only helps your team, right? And Teddy facilitating guys, too, helps as well because that keeps guys hungry. It keeps guys alert. It also keeps teams on edge. You can't just key in on him. If you are going to double team him, he has other options that he trusts. And that's what we're starting to see now. So I don't necessarily see it as a negative, that he didn't hit his average. It's the second highest average in the league, right? Like that's not easy to maintain, and he is the targeted guy. There's going to be nights where he can't score. And on this night, the positive against Edmonton is someone did step up. It was someone that really the onus shouldn't fall on as a U Sports player, but he accepted it. And he went with it. He rode that rhythm, and he had himself a great game, a game that you could definitely build on, right? And will he build on it? We'll have to see. I mean, he didn't have the same output against Saskatchewan, but again, like, this is a U Sports guy. This is the hardest part of the learning curve. He still has like 3 to 4 years left of university. So, but that said, in a crunch time, if he is feeling it, you can give him the ball and he will score big buckets in big minutes. So I don't think, it wasn't a runaway, but it was a big win nonetheless. Edmonton in the thick of things. Like, that's a team that is kind of desperate, trying to fend off, Vancouver and Saskatchewan and stay in the hunt for the playoffs. So I think it was a really good win, all things considered. They had the time to prepare for it. They came off back-to-back losses. They needed the win. They got it.
And you mentioned Teddy's game. An underrated part of Teddy's game is the fact that he rarely turns the ball over. He could play 30-plus minutes, and he'll have 1 turnover, 0 turnovers. You and I have also talked about it, the rebounding, another part of his game that is kind of often overlooked just because of the amount of points he scores, obviously. But, Teddy is not just a scorer. Like, when you really watch him play, like, there's so many little things that he does right as well. And often when you watch basketball, those guys that take the most shots, those guys that, that are so involved on offense, they're kind of slacking in a lot of those other areas. But Teddy, you can't. That's the furthest thing from the truth. Like, he brings it in all aspects of the game, really.
And defensively, he's an issue too, right? Like, that's the thing. Like, we've talked about the rebounding. Like, he's top 5 in rebounding, and they're not just gimme rebounds. Like, he's going back to play defense. He's in a position to get the rebounds because he's playing hard defensively. He's forcing turnovers. He's forcing guys to make plays. And the other thing with Teddy is a lot of times when he's forcing the turnover, he's gunning it north down the floor, getting that basket, either scoring himself or setting somebody up on, hate to use a hockey term here, but an odd man rush. Like, so he's doing things all over the court when he's not scoring. But the thing is he is scoring in a high volume too. So it kind of works out, So we look at it, the magnifying glass a little bigger, and it's easier to dissect the game and say, like, hey man, he didn't play well because you didn't see that typical 26 to 30 points that we're now growing accustomed to him sinking from game to game. But I actually thought he played a really good game because he wasn't a non-factor. I mean, 17 points is nothing to gawk at. Like, that's a good stat line in this league. And, the 17 points on top of how he got those 17 points, where he got those 17 points, and then, creating the steals and getting the rebounds as well. The assists, like the 5 assists, I think are huge too. Like, he is a complete player. And he is a real threat at both ends of the floor, and I don't think we talk about it enough. And, even from a leadership standpoint, he seems to be taking a bit of a leadership, taking accountability for his team when they're not playing well. He's not making excuses, but he's also not blaming. Like, it's hard to kind of explain, but, he's calling out himself and his team in a way that I feel is constructive. So I think he's been a huge asset for this team, and even through the adversity, we've only seen him through the good times, but even through the bad times, he's kind of impressed me.
And, while that was a great game, of course, but I've been, really excited to talk to you about the next game, the one against Saskatchewan, national broadcast, sold-out crowd. While I was in Kansas City stuffing my face, you were obviously there as the sideline reporter. So, first of all, I watched the broadcast and stuff. And first of all, Chuck Swirsky coming to Winnipeg, doing a national broadcast for a pro basketball team in my hometown. That is something, if you told a childhood Taylor Allen that, I don't even know what my reaction would have been. Like, that is just the coolest thing ever. So what was it like being there for that?
It was really cool, man. He is maybe the nicest guy, like one of the nicest guys in the industry. He had time for everyone. And it was funny because I got to chat with him a little bit during morning shoot around. And, I had all these questions. But then he's asking me all these questions. Like, he's just a curious guy. He's asking about the Jets. He's asking about the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade. And I'm like, who are you. Like, this is
He knows
awesome.
his stuff, damn.
He does, and he's trying to get clarification, like what these guys mean to the city and stuff like that, and kind of getting a feel for the Winnipeg sports scene. Like, he's genuinely interested in these cities and everything they have to offer. And if you follow him on Twitter, like, he's always posting pictures of the people he meets and the sites that he sees and stuff like that. But he was taking pictures with everyone, and it's funny. Like, a few times he called me over to take his phone so I could take some pictures for him. There's some baby onion signs out there, and like he had time for everybody. He was so nice, so patient. He speaks so highly of this league, this country, because you got to remember, he's not done with the NBA. He is the Chicago Bulls play-by-play guy for the entire NBA season, and then he spends his offseason coming back and forth from Chicago to call these games all over Canada, and his energy never wavers. Like, from the moment he walks into the gym, he's just a big smile on his face. Like, this is a dude who loves basketball. I swear to God, he could be at, like, Dakota High School, calling a 9th grade game, and you would get the same energy that you get from him calling Sea Bears or Bulls or Raptors during the Vince Carter Air Canada era. Like, it was a really, really cool experience, and he's not an arrogant guy by any stretch, and he understands how people are excited for this and how important he is to the game and growing the game. And I was thoroughly impressed with Chuck Swirsky on that. It's too bad you missed out, man. He's a really good guy. You'll see him soon, though. I know he'll be back, and I don't think he's leaving this league anytime soon. He really seems to be consuming this. So yeah, sorry about that, pal.
It's all good. The barbecue made up for it. But it is kind of funny, though, because his famous call, bring out the salami and cheese, mama, this ball game is over. Like, it kind of almost doesn't work in target score time, because really the game isn't over until that final basket.
Exactly.
He did call it out on the game-winning shot, but, back in the day, watching Raptors games, and of course, if you listen to, I think, does he still use it with the Bulls radio? Actually, I don't even know. But
he is still with the Bulls, yeah.
No, does he still use the salami and cheese with the...
I think so. Yeah. I think that's his catchphrase is no matter where he is. And I'll say this, I'll end with this before we get into the game. One of the coolest things for me, Taylor, was I was sitting behind the play-by-play broadcast team. So to hear him and Joe Razzo just doing their magic, man. It was so much fun to watch and see these guys having fun. These are two guys watching a game that are very knowledgeable, and the energy, you can feel it through the broadcast. I've watched all the national games, and you can feel it through the TV, but it's something different to watch it in person. That was pretty cool. It was a cool moment for me. We get, and how it is, we get to see a lot of people in terms of, from the Jets and stuff like that, the Bombers. There's a lot of legendary guys in our industry that come in and out. But you're right. I think because it's basketball, and just like, a year ago this wasn't possible, it was kind of cool to see. So yeah, no, it was awesome to see. But the game itself was also entertaining, and we will get into that one because I think we've got a lot to discuss here, Taylor.
Yeah, no, the game. I mean, it's funny. Saskatchewan, last place in the West, but it feels like their games with Winnipeg have been the best. Like, they're so entertaining, right? Like, these two teams, like, they match up against each other really well. It'd be fun to watch these teams have a best of 3, best of 5, best of 7 series even. But this is one that kind of Winnipeg needed. I mean, Ottawa now, they are pulling. I think it's over. They're 11-5 now, 2 games ahead of Winnipeg. With this loss against Saskatchewan, I kind of think that ship has sailed to get that number 1 seed and that bye to the championship weekend, Final Four semis. But I mean, this game, Teddy Allen. I mean, he had 17 points to the one before. This one, he's back to being Teddy, right? He scores 36. EJ, he has a huge game too, and both of them from 3 were totally lights out. Teddy hits 8, EJ hits 3. But then the biggest surprise of all, one of the most consistent guys on the team all year, Jelani Watson-Gale, he goes from scoring 22 points the game before, and then he puts up a donut. So even if Jelani was just decent this game, you would think that they would have won, because if you look at the numbers between the two teams, they're basically all even, and then you get to bench points. Saskatchewan had, I believe, like 20 more bench points than Winnipeg did. And usually where Winnipeg gets those bench points is from Jelani, because he ends up playing so many minutes. He's such an important player. So for him to put up a donut was, I think, the biggest surprise of the game. And the fact that they only lost by 4, considering one of the most important guys, or 3, considering one of their most important guys got, no production at all on offense is kind of impressive, I guess. But yeah, that was a real head scratcher because he's been so good for this team all year long.
Well, you know what, too? Like, you look at a lot of their losses, too. Like, I don't think Saskatchewan is as bad as their record shows. They've gone through some turmoil a bit this year, too. Dom Demopoulos was canned earlier this year. So they go halfway through the season, their head coach is gone, and they've got an assistant that's stepping up to take over in, doing a decent job. It looks like they played this team really hard this last game here, Winnipeg that is. But I don't know. I like talking to Justin Wright Foreman before the game started. At the morning shoot around, like one of the guys he was keying in on was like, yeah, like, you got to shut down Teddy, but he kept talking about Jelani. Like they were set for Jelani to go off. Like their game plan was to shut down Jelani, not let him get his shots. And they did a pretty good job at it. 0 points. He was a little hesitant. He missed a couple shots early. Then he kind of stopped shooting, and he was looking to facilitate more, which is great. But, he's been the 3 guy. We talk about AJ Hess's disappointment. It's been Jelani that's been stepping up in that department, but then AJ has himself a 16-point night, right? Like, and that was probably his best 3-point performance that I've seen him play so far this year. He was 4 for 8 from 3-point land, 50%. Not bad. There were some big threes, and it's like the thing is I'm seeing now is that every game there's one dude that steps up. Right? Like we just talked about it. There's Jelani, how many games? And then you have Simon for this one. You had that one Glenn Yang game. And then AJ Hess steps up with 16 points this time around, right? Like when did they come together where, it's not just one guy playing above himself for, 14, 15, where they're all scoring 10 to 15 points or 8 to, 16 points, we'll say, collectively. Because that would go a long way in taking the load off Teddy as well and getting him easier buckets because Teddy's earning all his buckets. Like, that is a well-earned nickname, the way we're watching him play right now. Like, he's blasting through double teams, taking it to the hoop, and if he can't get anything, he's dishing it off. But guys got to get more into the play and start contributing a little more consistently because I don't think you can depend on him come playoff time to need 36 points to get you through every single game, especially when it's championships on the line.
Yeah, and, even though he did have a good game, 27 shot attempts from Teddy. 27 shot attempts. Like, that's a Kobe Bryant kind of stat line when he was playing with, like, guys like Smush Parker and Kwame Brown and those bums. But, yeah, I'm actually kind of having a hard time almost figuring this team out because there are so many guys where it feels like one night they're getting you 0 points, and then the next night they could get you, 15, 16 points, 8 boards, whatever. There's so many guys that fall into that category. AJ Hess, Glenn Yang, Simon Hildebrand. These are guys that that could put up good numbers. These are guys that that can, come up big at the end of the games. But then there's just also been so many games where these guys are totally nowhere to be seen, and they give you, I used this saying last week, but they give you the Sam Mitchell 0.0000 stat line, right? So there's been a lot of positives so far this season, and obviously they're first place in the West, and let's be honest, no one even expected them to be in that place. I don't think even anyone on the team even thought that. Mike Taylor was pretty reserved with his predictions before the year when I was speaking with him. But yeah, I just feel this team is so unpredictable outside of, I'm going to throw Jelani in there, even though he did come off of a bad game, because I think that's just a one-off for him. But after EJ, Teddy, and Jelani, every single guy on the team feels like a wild card.
Well, and that's the other thing too, though, right? Like you mentioned it, the bench points, 34 for Saskatchewan, 11 for Winnipeg. Right, so right there. But the thing is, though, and at a post-game, Mike Taylor, head coach of the Sea Bears, talked about that a little bit. The challenge of having to guard a guy like Justin Wright Foreman, right? He's the top scorer in the league. He's the only guy that has more points than Teddy Allen per game in this league. And that is a problem. And he said, when you watch the early on tape, they got burned a few times because they were trying to double team him, and the rotation was missing down low. Like, there were a few plays where there was one that comes to mind with Julian Roche, the big guy, goes to set the screen, slips the screen, and kind of takes a long way too. It wasn't even really a direct route. Like, he kind of goes slightly left to the elbow and down, and then he just lobbed it over because I think it was Osiande that came up to help on the double team. And then whoever was at the low post, it might have been AJ Hess, but like no one came in across. And Chad Posthumous had his own guy up top, so there was like this weird triangle of guys that he just slipped through because no one knew. Chad thought there was someone behind him, and there wasn't, right? And then Osiande tries to run back, and he slaps the backboard, but he wasn't really close to getting a block on that. But that's the problem that he brings up, is you're so focused on him and taking his shots away that it's opening up for everybody else. The other big problem with Saskatchewan in this game for Winnipeg was they just wanted it more, man. Like, that is one thing that Wright Foreman said before the game was they feel that they are in this. Like, the games that they've lost this year have been close for the most part. There have been a couple of really close games, like bounces going the wrong way type deal. They feel they kind of got the poop end of the stick, so to speak, and they call themselves, they're like hungry dogs. They're hungry for more. They're hungry for wins. And he said, like, they believe they can make the playoffs, but they have to go on a huge run. What better way to start that than coming on national TV in your, rival team's arena, the nicest, biggest arena, NBA kind of atmosphere. As he said, the hostile crowd that he was looking forward to playing in front of, and it showed. But they come in here, and in front of the whole country, they say, no, Winnipeg's the best team. We just ran with them, right? And it was a back-and-forth game. Like, that stat line right across is pretty darn even. They each had 11-point leads at one point, and then it came down to a next basket wins. Like, it was that entertaining. The next basket won. And then who hits that shot? Justin Wright Foreman needs 1 point. He decides to step back, stare down Glenn Yang, and pull up in his eye for the three-pointer. Game over. Says bye to the fans. And it was entertaining. And, even for the fans, if you're a Seabears fan, he's engaging with you. That's got to be a ton of fun. So he causes problems, and that's why, because of those shots. But when he's also got the wherewithal, and in the postgame, he brought it up too, and it wasn't in a bragging sense, but he said, I had 9 assists. Like, he was 1 assist short of a double-double because his teammates were completing plays, right? Like, they had, I'm just trying to, here, let me see here. I got the points in front of me. So they've got 1, 2, 3 guys in double points and 1 guy with 9 points. Right, including Anthony Sigakili he plays for Brandon University. He had 10 points. He had a great game, actually. He had a massive dunk. He played really, really well. He got booed pretty hard for playing in Manitoba. They don't care. He's from Brandon. He's playing for Saskatchewan, so they let him know. But on the boards, man, like, they were so aggressive. Like, I don't know how many putbacks there were. Like, they just had that kind of, they say nose for the net in hockey, like a nose for the rim on putbacks. Like, any missed shot, they were just the first hand up and powering it down. Like, we were talking about it on the Reporters Row, actually with Mike Sawatsky. And, we were saying, like, it's like, when's the last time we've seen this many dunks in a game? Right? Like, they were just owning them left, right, and center. And after the game, Teddy Allen said, too, he said, we got to punch him in the mouth. And we haven't done that. And then AJ has clarified it, saying, like, yeah, we have to be the aggressor on defense. And they just weren't the aggressors on defense. And, that was a problem. It was a close game. But at the end of the day, like, you're the first-place team. Like, it being a close game isn't really a feather in the cap for you like it is for the Saskatchewan Rattlers. And the Rattlers kept you close. And when it came down to, and the thing is, too, Taylor, I'll finish with this. It felt like Winnipeg was heating up at the right time. Like, they were hitting all these baskets just before target time. It felt like they had momentum going into target time. I think they were down like 2 or 1 or whatever. It was really close, whatever it was. But then Saskatchewan was just like, no, we can't let this one get away. That's kind of what it felt like.
Yeah, that was going to be kind of my final takeaway as well. Like, it was so neck and neck the entire game. And then I think it was like a minute or two before target time. That's when Saskatchewan kind of really pulled away. And then Winnipeg, turned it on and made it things interesting in target score. And I know Seabears fans aren't happy with the way that ended, but for that to be a national broadcast, I mean, the league could not have asked for a better game than that. Like, that was perfect.
Stars aligned, like, figuratively
Absolutely.
And literally. Like, you had the 2 biggest stars in the league right now going head-to-head. Both had massive games, 36 and 29 points. Were effective all over the floor. Like, I got to say, Justin Wright Foreman is one of my favorite players to watch in this league. They are 2 stars, but totally separate ends of the spectrum, right? Like, Teddy's a little more powerful, a little more like the Matrix. He kind of slows the game down and creates the lanes. Like, you can kind of see it happening. There's a build-up to it. Where Wright Foreman is just so shifty and fast. Like, some of those reverse layups he put in were just absolutely ridiculous. Like, he is so fun to watch, and the charisma the animation, the yelling when he hits in the when he hits a layup, or going to the fans after that were chirping them all game and going right in their ear, letting them know that they just won. Like, I don't know. I'm a guy that likes the stars of the league. This is a guy that's good for the league. He's engaging. He's well thought out in his interviews. He's great with the media. Gives like very insightful answers, and he's a star in this league. In every it's what you need in a star, from the sense he can play the game at the highest level, but then he also carries himself well away from the court. And I don't know. We've watched him now 3 times this year against Winnipeg. I've been impressed with him all the way through.
If you take your Winnipegger hat off, or our reporter's hat off, and just if you just sat down in front of your TV and you're flipping through the channels and you saw this Canadian Elite Basketball League game between these 2 random cities, and you sit down, you're watching, you see the crowd, how it's a sold out crowd, and you see Chuck Swirsky, nice walk down memory lane with him doing the broadcast, and then you find out that there's these 2 of the top scorers in the league, these 2 stars of the league are playing, and they're going at it, and the game goes down to the wire. I mean, again, I think that was just like the best commercial the league could have, ever asked for. And, just going back to Saskatchewan for a second, despite being the last place team, or tied for last place in the league, they're actually one of my favorite teams to watch. Like, they're an old school type of brand of basketball that they like to play. Like, they're big, they're aggressive, they're lanky, they're not afraid to foul you hard at the rim and stuff like that. Like, I actually really enjoy watching them play. And, I mentioned it earlier, but I feel like every time them and Winnipeg do play, it feels like a playoff atmosphere. And who knows, maybe the Winnipeg-Saskatchewan rivalry, that's starting to grow a little bit. I mean, that would be fantastic. I mean, we all know how great the Bombers and Riders rivalry would be. So for the basketball community to have that as well, that would be incredible. But
there was a dude on courtside that had, because they were making signs. There were signs all over the arena for this game, right? And this guy's sign simply said "Sask sucks," SUX, and the S's were snakes. I thought it was hilarious. And he just stood there deadpan the whole game and just held this sign like on his feet, in front of his knees. It was the funniest thing. I think it's already picking up. I also want to mention real quick, Adong McCoy from Saskatchewan. He had 15 points. He was 7 for 9 from the field. Like, that was another guy who had a really, really good understated game. I know, Wright Foreman takes a lot of the spotlight, but there were so many guys. That was such a complete game from Saskatchewan. And this is one you build. Like, they, Wright Foreman said the morale's pretty high right now, and they got to go on a run. That's a pretty good way to start it. So, the Winnipeg Sea Bears need to get back on track. And they got a couple of big games. And first we're going to start with the next game coming up on Friday, and that is against the Montreal Alliance. So Montreal and Winnipeg have played in Montreal. Winnipeg lost that game. It was a tough one for Winnipeg because it was the second of back-to-backs, because they had just, if I recall correctly, they had got blown out by Ottawa the night before. I believe it was a Sunday. Yeah, it was a Sunday day game. That was the day after Canada Day. They got blown out 99-86 by Ottawa. Then they lose 89-85 to Montreal. Now, recalling that game, Montreal is a very athletic team, and it's really going to come down to who can establish their brand of basketball and suck the other team to play their style, right? If Winnipeg can get that physical game, own the low post, that's going to give them a better chance. But if they let Montreal get in a run and gun, they're really going to be in trouble because, this is a game now. You've lost 3 of your last 4, and then your next game's against Calgary. If you lose that game, you are now in second place, and who knows what Edmonton does in that point too. Like, you could now find yourself dangerously close to being in a playoff race that sees you fall out, which could be an epic fail, considering all they need to do is win one game to clinch.
Yeah, and I mean, they're not totally out of the race for first place, but like we both kind of alluded to earlier, a lot of things have to go right from to jump over Ottawa to get that. So for me, I think if I was a Sea Bears fan, what I would care most about, coming into this home stretch is maybe easing up on EJ and Teddy a little bit. These guys are playing, 35, 36, 37 minutes a night, and Teddy's, example, he can shoot the ball over 20 times a game kind of thing sometimes too. But I think, down the home stretch here, rest these guys a little bit. I'm not saying, drop their minutes down to 20 minutes, but even just slash, 5 minutes off their nights basically. And let's try to get some of these bench. We keep talking about this, but let's try to get some of these bench guys. Let's try to get these AJ Hesses, these Glenn Yangs. Let's just try to get these guys into a rhythm. Let's just try to get these guys to build up some confidence, heading into the postseason, assuming that the Sea Bears don't have an epic collapse and miss it, of course. But yeah, because right now I just feel like the way they're playing right now, losing 3 of their last 4. Kind of says that too, of course, but they're not probably playing their best basketball right now. And I feel if they're going to go on a run that weekend, they need more guys to step up. So for me, that's kind of the biggest thing I think they need to really be focusing on, not so much the standings and, beating these guys and whatever, as dumb as that may sound. But I just think that they really need to focus on themselves and make sure they're playing their best basketball when it really matters.
And I'm going to say this. I'm not saying that Winnipeg's going to miss the playoffs. Like that's like the odds of that happening are so slim. And to your point, I don't think your goal anymore is on that first place. I think you just got to take care of business here now and start building momentum. You've earned this opportunity to go through this adversity and battle back because of the wins you got early on in the season. But the thing is, you got to get it back on track before the playoffs, because you want to be going into the playoffs with, a good taste in your mouth, not a sour taste in your mouth, right? Or where guys are, when you start seeing the locker room falling apart a little bit. Not saying that's happening, but you don't want to see it happen, right? Where guys start blaming each other and things like that. You know how things go when things aren't going well. And then you look at a team like, Saskatchewan, if they play like they did last game and they build on that, and they go in with momentum after having a terrible season. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like these playoffs are not a typical playoffs. You don't have series. They are one games. Like, you don't want to chance anything. These are your times to figure out your adjustments. And I think that's the big thing right now for Winnipeg is what are our adjustment options? Like, they know the adjustments. It's who is going to step up at what time. And we're seeing a little bit of everything, but the pieces have not totally come together. Like, other than Jelani, who's not had, who's been great up until last game, right? I'm not going to pin him on one game. Who else is going to step up when you need them, and how are they stepping up, right? Is it defensively? Like, Okafor came in for a few good minutes against Saskatchewan, guarding right Foreman, and, he's a little Tasmanian devil on the ball, right? On the other hand, his shooting isn't great, and he's been missing a lot of shots. He's not really produced offensively. So, it's like these liabilities in certain ways. So you get strengths in one area, but it might be a liability in the other, or it might just be an anomaly, right? Like, what, good or bad. 19 points from, a Simon Hildebrandt, that leads the team in scoring. Or you might get the anomaly Jelani at 0 points. So that's, I think, what they've got to figure out. And the thing with a big boost for Winnipeg here is, I don't know if he'll be back yet, but Travion Graham injured himself in the last game against Winnipeg, and that's the big guy for that, for Montreal, that is really like the only one that gives you real concern for rebounds. So the strength-wise in the post, Winnipeg should have the edge here, and they're going to have to expose that. But, as we said, like, this Montreal team is fast. So to put it in perspective, we recorded this on Wednesday. Calgary and Montreal played on Wednesday, and those are the next two opponents for Winnipeg. And it was a good game. Like, it was close. 77-74, Calgary won. So Montreal not doing any favors for themselves or Winnipeg. So that puts pressure on both teams coming into Friday. But, these guys were dead even. Like, this was a defensive deadlock. A 77 target score is relatively low in this league. Like, defensively, there was, Calgary out-rebounded them 47-45. Blocks 4 each. There was some rim protection there. And even the steals, 8-7. So Montreal 8-7 for Calgary. So, defensively, these guys were on both ends. It was hard to get any kind of traction with this game, but man, there were some good players. Like, I'm a huge fan of Alain Louis, the point guard for Montreal. Like, that guy can create. He's so fast. Montreal loves cutting to the middle, Taylor. Like, they take every ball to the middle, and they are trying to create from the inside, whether that's taking it to the hole or trying to spot up for a shooter. But they're, at least in the last games I've seen, not the biggest three-point shooting team. They were 31% from the three-point line today, on Wednesday, that is. So this is a team that, if you get them in transition, you're screwed. This is a fast team that'll burn you on transition, so you have to take care of the ball. You have to be ready after you score for their inbound play because they're coming at you fast. When they get in set plays, they're a little bit easier to guard, and Calgary found that out too, right? Like they had Chateau, and he was a big guy that was wreaking havoc for Calgary on Montreal. So you know what I mean? Once they got them in their own set, slowed them down a little bit, the game was a little bit more manageable, and they walked out with the win. But when Montreal went on their runs, it was because that transition game got out of hand. And as good as Calgary is, Montreal is just a really fast, hard-nosed team. They like playing fast, they like playing hard, they like taking it to the hole. That means they're going to be drawing fouls. So you have to get here you talk about Glenn Yang. So if Glenn Yang's out there as a point guard, you cannot let him come over half court with any kind of speed or any kind of angle on you, where now you have to get your team, who's been struggling when it comes to rotations, having to make those rotations quickly. That's going to leave somebody open under the hoop. That's the big key, I think, to Montreal.
Well, I think I'm overstaying my welcome here in Ronald's parking lot. So I think maybe in closing, and I apologize to all our Target Score listeners for having such a crappy setup here. I was hoping, to be in a nice hotel room and, and it'd be all good. But so yeah, my apologies. I'll be home. I'll be home tomorrow, and I'll be at the game on Sunday reporting lives, and we'll be back to our regularly scheduled programming. Wow, I can't speak either. But these last 2 weeks, I've talked about the potential of Jared Ogunbemi Jackson signing with the Sea Bears. How he was interested, how Winnipeg was interested in him as well, obviously. I did get the official update, though, that he will not be signing with the team. So the Sea Bears that you see today are the Sea Bears that you'll be getting for the rest of the year. But the thing is, other teams, though, they might be making some moves because, again, like we talked about last week, you can add a guy to your team with 5 games left in the year, and they could be still eligible to play for you in the playoffs. So lots of teams now are kind of hovering around the 15 game point. So we might see some other teams boost their lineups a little bit and bring in some new faces and whatnot. So we'll see how that maybe kind of shakes out in the coming days and whatnot. But in Winnipeg's situation, though, no moves will be made. Jared is not coming. Would have been a great story, but yeah, I can't say I'm surprised. I put out 40% chance of him signing last week when we spoke about it, just because, he still, hasn't officially signed a deal with anywhere in the fall, at least last I heard, and he's coming off a knee injury as well, so timing of it just probably did not work out too well, but who knows, maybe next year they can figure out something with more time to talk about it, but yeah, that's the official update and final update on that.
And just quickly, because that's going to be tough, I just want to jump ahead really quickly to the Calgary game. 2 guys that really impressed me. 3 guys, really. Chateau is incredible, big guy. He's going to be a ton of problems for the Sea Bears down low. Sean Miller-Moore, man, that guy's incredible, too. Talking about, Alain Louis creating his stuff. Sean Miller-Moore is a really great player, a great guard that can distribute, that can drive and shoot. Another guy they're going to have to keep an eye on, and Stephen Smith had a great game on Wednesday, too. 20 points, 6 rebounds, 3 steals. If he's on that's going to be tough for Winnipeg, too. Sorry to rush through that one, but we do have Taylor that has to get home alive to his girlfriend. So that is why it's a little quicker than normal in this pace. Yeah, really quickly, though.
She's blowing up my phone a little bit. She's blowing up the phone a little bit, and I don't blame her. I did tell her I'd be quick, but I do apologize.
Do you want to tell us really quick about the basketball experience, though? Do you have time for that?
I do. Sure. Yeah. So like I kind of said, we drove down to Kansas City just for a fun little road trip. And, it's kind of funny. Everyone was asking us, why are you going to Kansas City of all places? And I will be honest, the main reason was the barbecue. Winnipeg, we have an unreal food scene. But when it comes to barbecue, though, we are severely lacking. Where Kansas City, they're known for the best barbecue in the States. And my partner and I were both huge foodies. So that was, a big selling feature. And it's only a 12-hour drive, too, which isn't so bad. And we like doing the road trips and whatnot. But anyways, another part of Kansas City, though, that people might not know about is all these cool museums that they have. They have the World War I Museum. They have the Negro Baseball League Museum and a bunch of other really cool, the American Jazz Museum as well, a bunch of cool stuff. But one of these cool things that they have is called the College Basketball Experience. And they specifically say we are not a museum, because they're kind of not. So when you go there, they have all these cool interactive basketball games You can play,
cool.
like, for example, there's this one, kind of caged off area, or several of these caged off areas. It'll be like you hit as many free throws as you can in 1 minute, hit as many 3-pointers as you can in 1 minute. You can there's this one area where you can recreate, or you can try to hit like a buzzer beating shot kind of thing. And there's another area where they have all these different baskets, different heights where you can, dunk the ball. So, yeah, just a really, really, really cool place in Kansas City. So if anyone ever makes the trip, I would definitely recommend that.
Well, Taylor, glad you had fun. Get home safely. Thank you, everybody, for listening to Target Score Weekly. Again, the Sea Bears in action twice this week. They take on Montreal Alliance at home. That's Friday at 7 o'clock. And then on Sunday, a 2 p.m. game against Calgary. That one's a big one. Depending on how the Montreal game goes, it could be a battle for first place in the West. Taylor and I will be back next week with another episode. Have a good week, and we'll see you next week on the Target Score. Thank you for listening to the Target Score Weekly podcast. To stay up to date with Winnipeg Sea Bears and CEBL news, as well as future episode releases, follow Joey and Taylor on Twitter and Instagram at TaylorAllen31 and at Joey Slattery CTV. And wherever you're getting the podcast, be sure to subscribe to never miss an episode.